I will be talking about Switchboard, the tool that we have developed for practically the tasks that Dima has been covering in his previous presentation. And I also will be talking about the tool, how we use it, give you an example. So to start, just a couple of words about me. As I told, my name is Dmitry. With my 15 years in IT, I spent most of this time, like more than 12 years already, in QA department. And in scope of this work, I have participated in numerous big and small fintech testing projects, because Devexperts is doing fintech. And in scope of this work, we had a lot of tool support, different kinds of QAOps tools, testing tools, whatever ops tools. So some of you that have participated or maybe have seen my previous presentation about Switchboard that I have presented the week before last week on QA Challenge Accepted may have seen me there. So maybe I will repeat myself just a little bit, but again, bear with me, I will give you an example. It will be more or less entertaining as much as XML files can be entertaining, okay? So the goal for today is to take a look on the tool, why it exists, take a look on a slightly boring but useful example, and then I will give you some conclusions that we have on the tool and some ideas how you can use it in your projects, and some ideas that we are doing for this tool, implementing for this tool now, and some concerns and problems that we actually have. So the tool. To start with the tool, let's take a look on how our typical testing pipeline, I would call it, usually looks like. Basically, Dima has done a perfect job describing it. So again, bear with me with some repetition here. So basically, how we do testing. We start with TMS, which is test management system, and we define scenarios. Then we do some coding for the test scenarios, like automation. Then we execute these tests in some kind of continuous integration system, which in our case is TeamCity. So it's TeamCity. And as a result, we get some report. And this report is then used to fine-tune your next iterations or next test plans. So in general, in projects, this is the typical pipeline. And if you see it from a distance, usually it looks like very simple task. You just get your stuff working in line, and it should be working like that. At least that's how top management always sees that. But here's the thing. Once you start using this pipeline in your real life, you really quickly find out that you have to really fine-tune and somehow interoperate all your tools that are implemented in your pipeline. So they will be serving different kinds of purpose. Like the example with Jenkins, you don't have to use Jenkins as is, but instead you have to really use Jenkins API, create some DSL tools, so you can fine-tune how your Jenkins operates over your tests. Otherwise, it will be just an unmaintainable piece of code. And in general, this is what is called QAOps, when we're not only using tools, but we are trying to make them work in a meaningful way. The thing is, magic happens sometimes. Sometimes it's not happening, okay? What are the challenges that we had in our experience, in our different projects? So first of all, we had a challenge, like Dima had, of triggering and controlling CI jobs by TMS input. And by saying so, I mean creating CI pipelines and CI jobs in a meaningful way that is reflecting risk-based testing approach, different kinds of complex criteria that we may have for different releases. So our test base for each release can be defined not only by release scope, but also by some technology limitations, by some different execution limitations, multiple types of problems that we can encounter while trying to define what we have to run and how we have to run it. So the next challenge that we had in real life, having thousands of tests basically in our projects, is configuring CI jobs based on product and project limitations. That means, like a typical example of one of our biggest projects, not the biggest one, but one of the biggest. Basically, the problem was we had to run more than 1,500 tests each release, and by splitting them into separate batches, into parallel runs, we had to split them to more than 200 executions every time. And the problem was that we could not create like a single instance of the job configuration for each of these 200 runs, but rather we had to create them in a very creative way every time, because all of these executions, all of these 200 executions for full regression were always a little bit different. We had different kinds of configuration to start the desktop application. We had a different configuration to provide the data, to control it. So it was kind of hard. And the last challenge, not the last challenge, but one of the last challenges that we had is for one of our projects where we had a business need to synchronize test cases in a TMS, in Jira basically, with the source code. And by doing so, we mean that we are trying to shift left, and we are trying to not duplicate ourselves and do not do our work twice, but rather the idea was that we will write tests in source code and then create them automatically in a test management system. And creating them in the test management system is required so we can provide test cases that we have tested as a part of the deliverable. So, for example, if we have tested some piece of the code, some version of the code, we have to provide like a baseline of the tests that have been executed for this release in a more or less readable way, okay? In a more or less human readable form. So these are the challenges, some most obvious challenges that we had in scope of our QAOps journey. So what we have found by implementing many tools and many custom integrations between all these tools is that we better create some kind of common approach, or maybe some kind of unified approach, unified configuration, so we can try to implement some kind of tool that will allow us to create new integrations between testing tools in a more maintainable way. So we tried to articulate this idea in a tool we call Switchboard. So here is the model of the unification between all kinds of integrations. The integration, as we see it, integration between testing tools, as we see it, is an action of transferring test data from one shape to another. What are the typical actions that we can take against test data? First, and the most obvious, is extraction. So we can extract the test data from its source in its initial form. Then we can create a unified form, so we can translate the initial form of the test cases to some kind of consumable, operable one. Then we can filter these test cases that we have just parsed and transformed into a filtered subset, so they will be, so for example, not whole regression, but only regression that is meaningful for this particular release, given the release scope. Then, in scope of integration, we may want to split these test cases onto already filtered test cases onto different batches. Not exactly batches, but different kinds of subsets that are grouped by functional area, for example, or by execution type, or whatever, basically. Then we may want to create runnable batches, and it is the way tests are combined into batches that are applicable to a test execution system, like TeamCity. And the last but not least, we always have to optimize the resulting batches in order to remove duplicates, for example, if the test somehow got into one single test got into two separate batches. We have to eliminate that. And also some recomposition of the final batches may be required in order to save time, reduce the fragility, whatever. There are many cases for that. This is the model how we think about basically any integration. And if you get this model of thinking and try to understand how your different kind of integration between testing tool work, you can see that, for example, Jira integration that we have developed to get issues from Jira and create the issues in Jira, we were basically extracting data from Jira, processing it, filtering based on Jira fields, and splitting them also based on Jira fields, like a functional area. Few more examples. We had a Java parsing integration, which allowed us to get the source code in a also meaningful way, so we can, for example, transfer them into test management system. So for Java parsing integration, we did extraction and processing. On TeamCity integration, on the other hand, we did splitting, batching, and optimizing. And the Cucumber integration, which is our least loved child, we did extraction and filtering and splitting. Again, summarizing this approach of unifying the integrations as an ideas, the goal here is define every integration as a configuration block, defining its functions and responsibilities in an absolutely unified way. This might sound really complex, but let's take a look at an example, and maybe it will shed some light on why it exists at all. Let's take a look on the last example of creating Jira test cases, human-readable Jira test cases, directly from the source code. So the idea was that we will be writing source code directly, like an IDEA, Eclipse, whatever, and we will be using properly defined class annotations, method annotations. We will use proper JUnit structures, like before all, before each, etc. And we will make some predefined comments. So our integration between Java code parsing and Jira API will use this metadata that we extract from source code to create issues in Jira with human-readable words, and it will create summary, it will create descriptions, it will set labels, it will define the actions and the expected result in a more or less human-readable way, I would say that. Here is the example how the test case looked like. I know nobody loves reading source code from the screen, so I will try to explain what's written here. So basically, the idea was that we will use just out-of-the-box JUnit annotations to extract some of the basic data, and we will use special formatting for comments, for example, comments starting with action and comments starting with the result, to actually parse the like given when then steps for test case description. So the end result was expected to look like this. So we will create a test case with some description, with some overview, with components and labels and all the fields in Jira. How the configuration, unified configuration, looks like for this example. Again, don't hate me already. I will try to explain what it is. So basically, we are defining an first integration. So basically, there are two integrations inside, unified integrations in this configuration. The first one is Java parsing integration. And for it, we are defining the name, which is just identifier for the internal configuration logic, and the class which will implement this integration inside the ClassPath package. Then we're defining the extraction configuration, speaking directly to Java parsing configuration, which files should it consider to be consisting tests, what are the annotation for the test method. So basically we are using JUnit, that's why we're using parameterized test, and if you know a little bit of regex, regular expressions, you can see that it's parameterized or not parameterized, and also some funny stuff with before all and before each annotations. And for the second integration in this configuration, which is Jira integration, it is slightly more complex because extraction is simpler process, but creation or applying the data that we have just parsed from the source code is slightly harder. So here we are also identifying the test case, the name. We are setting the source of the data. So basically you see here, if you remember that, sure about that, but here we're identifying that the source of the extraction for the test data will be the previous configuration, which is Java parser, sorry. We are setting some basic important data for Jira, because Jira will not be able to create anything without authentication, right? And last, but definitely the most important, is the test run consumers, which is basically definition of the mapping of the test data that we have just parsed from the source code to the fields of Jira that we expected to be filled. So, and here we are defining what will be the implementation for different fields. For example, we're setting the project that we will be creating issues in, what will be the class that implements supplier for the summary of the issue. And also, sorry about that, but I will not show you how field values looks like, but because it's just a big structure, big JSON structure of different mappings. For example, we consider this annotation to be a source for Jira priority, and this annotation should be the source of Jira labels, and etc. So it's really more boring than entertaining. So as a result, we compose this configuration, and you see it down below as a JSON file. We define libraries that are required for this unified configuration, which is basically the Jira integration we have and Java parser integration we have. We're giving this tool a source code that it will be parsing, and obviously the runner, which is the tool itself, and the JSON configuration we just composed. And by running this jar, you are creating the test cases in Jira directly from the source code that you have just parsed. So this turns basically into this. So we have created an issue, we have set it components, we have created description, we have set severity, and we have created more or less human-readable description of what was done by this test case. And what's important is that when we will update our test case in the code base with next releases, this test case, by running the same tool, it will be updated with the new data we have. It will be formatted into new form as we progress with the source code. So, as a short conclusion for this idea, basically, what we try to achieve is somehow some kind of a unified approach of defining the integration between different tools. So it's you can think about it as like integration framework, but not in terms of library, but in terms of how you should think about intercommunicating your testing tools. We have created far from perfect but unified standardized configuration. We understand that it's a big room for improvement on how this configuration looks and works, and I will tell a couple of words about that in the very last of my presentation. But it's still a unified way to see your testing tools. And we did some implementations for actual integrations with different tools. So we are using Cucumber, we're using Java and JUnit 5, we're using TeamCity, we're using Jira integration, and we also have some other integrations which are not so perfect, but we're working with them. So how it can help you as of today? Just few examples from the top of my head. That's what we actually did. We are using Cucumber tagging to create TeamCity jobs. If somebody of you worked with Cucumber at any point of your career, you know that Cucumber has pretty advanced tagging systems that you can that allows you to split the test cases into the several separate batches, levels, whatever. But Cucumber tagging system works more or less local, and it allows you to create more or less local executions, local batches simultaneously, but you're missing the last part of actually maintaining mapping from your local jobs to TeamCity jobs. And we are doing that using Switchboard. Other example is JQL filtering for JUnit tests, which is also important. I suppose it's more like a problem of fintech, because Dimo's case was very interesting, but you reduced your testing from 3 days to like 1 hour, right? 3 days of testing would be the absolute heaven for us, because we have reduced it for one of our clients. We have reduced the testing from 6 months to 1.5 months, and this is a success. So basically, JQL filtering is important for us, because we may, for one of our clients, we have, for example, for only core functionality, which does not include any UIs, we have more than 9,000 tests, and probably it's already more than 10,000 by today. The problem is that even if we will create them perfectly and we will maintain them perfectly, there is no practical reason to run them all the time at once, because it will be more, carbon emission than sense, because we will have to maintain them, we will have to understand why they failed, and they will fail. So JQL filtering, if somebody doesn't know what this stands for, JQL is Jira Query Language. It's the internal language of Jira that allows you to select issues in a very advanced way. So we are using JQLs to actually select the test scope from the source code. So we will not run everything, but we will run only things that are meaningful for this release. Yeah, and the other thing that you may consider interesting, that's the issue we have been working for last month. We are doing Excel integration. We are doing that in order to support some documentation routines we have for our biggest clients by today. But what that means, basically our task is pretty small there. We have to just be able to export and import test cases from Jira to Excel to support some local, not very interesting routines. But given the Switchboard unification, you should consider that as if the Excel implementation will be in place, that means that you will be able to run it with any other integration, that you will be able to, for example, export Cucumber tests into Excel. You may be able to pre-select test cases in Excel and run them in given the source code. So you can create test cases in Excel from your source code, whatever you want. So basically, it's the framework for you to create this random integration with random stuff. Summarizing some stuff that we are doing right now with this. So obviously, it's Excel integration, which is in work right now. We will be doing Jenkins integration pretty soon in terms of maybe some of the API that they are providing, maybe some more or less custom code. It's still thing to be considered. And yeah, our most painful stuff, we will be working with some kind of configuration UI. We think about maybe someone of you have seen a tool called Spring Initializer. Probably we'll create something like this that will allow you to create this configuration by just dragging stuff onto other stuff. So Switchboard is open source, and you can get the configurations, you can get the integrations all on our GitHub. And on top of that, we will be moving this tool to our event called OpenHack. It will be a contest for open source, and Switchboard will be a part of this contest. So you're welcome to join us and maybe request some propose some ideas or participate in them. So and we will be happy to hear from you, because we understand that tool might be a little bit awkward, as many tools we create, right? So we want to hear from you all how you see them and how you can use them in your work. And yeah, let's try to work on it together. And yeah, I should say that because I'm a manager of QA, join us in general. We have many positions, not only working with Switchboard, but also working with different kinds of projects and different kinds of complex stuff. Yeah, so basically that's it from my side.